Yes. From there, no, this is not. No, I'm just saying because this is not my laptop. I don't know. So that's what I'm asking. It's already on the desk. I'll open it for you. We are ready. We are ready here. I don't know if you're waiting for us. Can you hear me, Wally? I don't think you can hear me.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Good to see you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I think we should wait for a couple of minutes. So let's see if other panelists will join us in due course. Okay, Lukman is here. So we are waiting for Dr. Rabi from Katsina, Federal University, Katsina. So we are waiting for Dr. Mbalize from Unizik.
And still.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can just use your laptop.
Okay, Tosin is there, right? Tosin is there with.
Yeah.
Okay. Come on. Fantastic. Yeah, so we are waiting for, okay. Dr. Mbalise. Yes. Good. How about Dr. Rabi? Is Dr. Rabi also there present? Okay. So.
I'm having a problem with this thing.
All right, so sorry for the delay. I just put a call through to Dr. Rabi, so he will join us in the next couple of minutes. So while waiting for him, I think we should just hit the ground running, so without wasting much of our time, because we are like 19 or 9 minutes behind already. So good morning, everyone. My name is Waliu Ismaila. I'm a PhD candidate here in the Department of History, West Virginia University. We all know the title of the panel, Imperial Welfarism in Africa, a Paradox. So today we have about 4 or 5 panelists who will be presenting their work. And the overall question we trying to wrestle with in this panel is to see if we can refer to as a colonial state as a welfare state. To what extent can we say imperialism reinforced welfare programs or welfare schemes, during the period of the British colonial during the British colonial period in Nigeria. So today, I think on my panel, I have Oluwatosin Adeyemi from University of Ibadan. I have Ayodeji from Wisconsin, Madison. I have Lukman from University of Pretoria. I have Dr. Mbalise from Unizik. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and Dr. Abdullahi Rabi will join us, in the course of the discussion. I think he's at the gate right now. So Dr. Abdullahi Rabi is from Federal University, Katsina. So I don't have any order right now. So who wants to go first? If you think you want to go first, so let me just quickly introduce you to the house. Or shall I just use my discretion? Okay, come on. Okay, so since you volunteer to go first, let me just let me quickly.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We're having Lukman on board now. So Lukman Adewale Kadri is from Edenot Local Government of Osun State. He's an alumnus of the University of South Africa, where he earned a bachelor degree in international relations and diplomacy. He has a master's degree in governance and regional integration from Pan-African University, situated in Cameroon. Currently, he's pursuing a master's in political science at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. He worked as a research assistant at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies between 2020 and 2021. He equally worked as a volunteer, peace advocate at the Paramalam in Jos Plateau State. Currently, he's working as a research assistant in African Center for the Study of the United States, University of Victoria. Lukman have penchant for traveling, cooking, discussing political issues, and loves his and loves his country and humanity abundantly. So thank you very much, Lukman. So let's have you on board.
Okay, good morning. Really to present my paper, which is still in progress. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me clearly, please, sir? Emma?
Yes, we are with you. Yeah.
Okay. The title of my paper is "The Paradox of Neo-Colonial Welfarism in Contemporary Nigeria." Colonial welfare, in my view, was a paradox in its colonies.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, I
we
can
hear you. Please, if you are not the panelist on session, please kindly mute yourself, please. But we can hear you clearly. So Lukman, go on.
Okay.
Continue, Lukman.
Colonial welfare, in my view, was a paradox in its colonies, in that it was a carrot and stick approach.
That's what I mean.
LSA conference, please help us on over there, please. Mute over there, please.
Dr. Waliu, can you please help me share my screen?
Okay, let me see if it's possible to
just attach it from the email I sent.
The LSA should be able to do that for you.
Please, can people please mute their mic? May I continue?
Yes,
Can you
continue,
hear
man.
me?
We are running out of time. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, they can hear us.
Can you hear me?
I think they can.
But I'm
Yes.
the one presenting. Other coordinator, kindly please mute others. I think you have the power
I
to
think
do
you
that
should
at
be able
the end.
to mute others, please.
Can
Lukman
you
should
he-
be the
Can
only
you
one talking.
hear us from here? Can you hear me?
Yes. Continue, Lukman.
Okay. Colonial warfare, in my view, was a paradox in its colonies, in that it was a carrot and stick approach, premised on oppression, exploitation, and slight consideration for development at a later stage. A host of accounts on colonial history are majorly centered on colonial exploitation of the African continent without consideration of its welfare initiative, which date back to 1929, in which the Colonial Development Act was enacted by the Parliament. The aim of the Colonial Development and Welfare Act was mainly to develop the economic base of colonies. Unfortunately, the initiative failed to fulfill its proposed objectives as a result of discrepancies in the colonial office, which crippled the colonial government's efforts, as the 10 years development plan in almost all the British colonies were met with hello.
Continue,
Hello.
Lukman.
Okay, discrepancies in the colonial office, which crippled the colonial government efforts as a 10-year development plan in almost all the British colonies were not met despite the allocation of funds by the Parliament. The account of colonial welfarism by Wicker 1958 detailed the intentions of the colonial government to develop its colonies, but were met with the unfavorable policies of the colonial office. It also brought to the fore the role played by the likes of Bishop Wilberforce, Professor Hancock and Adam Smith's World of Nations, and the American War of Independence, and the consciousness aroused by Joseph Chamberlain in his speech at the House of Commons. The following schools explained colonial welfarism: modernization perspective, Marxist perspective, and the post-colonial perspective. The modernization school and the Marxist positionalities maintain that colonies need transmutation from a traditional system to a modern, urban, and secular one, while Marxists noted that social change is needed for the attainment of a socialist society. Although Marxists argue that imperialism was an instrument used for the diffusion of capitalism. The post-colonial school argued that colonialism ended, but its legacies permeated every facet of the developing society, from culture, entertainment, and religion to its superstructure. The literature of colonialism in the post-colonial era happened to be clouded by revisionist thoughts, like that of Ferguson 2006, where historical past were exposed to all for critical reflection. It is such accounts of colonialism that brought to the fore the decolonization theory. This proposal will tilt to the philosophical inclination of post-colonialism premised on how colonial legacies turned out to be a core determining frame in the post-colonial African society. It is against this backdrop that this proposed study aims to bring to the fore the paradox of neo-colonial welfarism in contemporary Africa, which to a large extent tally with the epic decoloniality school of thought pioneered by Ndlovu Gatsheni 2005. The proposed study hinges on the assumption that colonial welfarism has inadvertently seeded a superstructure of dependency in the post-colonial African society, which inevitably battered neo-colonial welfarism. The proposed study aims to bring to the fore how Africa, nay Nigeria, can evoke the ethos of dependency theory without causing a friction in its multilateral ties with the global north. And the theoretical consideration for this proposed paper are just two: roster stages of development and dependency theory. Central to Rosto's postulation is that a society has to pass through 5 stages in its quest for modernization. Let us not forget that both the capitalist, Marxist, and development theorists unanimously recommend that the modernization of society translates to societal well-being, but in the context of approach, they largely differ. So the first one is a traditional society, which centers on control over, which control over uncertainty is obvious in non-secularism and the rigidity of primordial values. In that context, we have forward linkages, no backward linkages, in that like they export resources, but they don't send back to the colonies. And also, again, we have the precondition to take off, which is commercial exploitation of natural resources, reliance on manpower, and exploitation of the exploited natural resources, exploitation of products such as crude oil, cocoa, cotton, and timber. It's premised steadily on exportation of goods, forward and backward linkages, but reliance mostly on importation. And also we have the takeoff stage, which is consolidation of manufacturing sectors. We also have drive to maturity, development of wider and commercial base, acceleration of GDP and GNI is evident in such context. We also have the age of mass consumption, which is the last stage of Rostow stages of development. And that one is centered on it's centered on the exploitation of comparative advantages in international trade, a viable presence in the international economy.
Needs to go.
Okay, let me just say the conclusion. Hello?
Go on.
Okay. In conclusion, neo-colonial welfarism has evidently proven the indelibility of colonial legacy as it perforates all aspects of post-colonial African society to date. This is certainly the standpoint of epic decolonialist school of thought as a revisionist post-colonial assumption. The core colonial welfare thoughts the core colonial welfare legacies are evident in the continued reliance on foreign aid for the funding of key infrastructural projects such as seaports, speed trains, airports, hospitals, health facilities, and roads. Reliance on neo-colonial welfarism reliance on neo-colonial welfarism from a radical point of view is an act of commission and omission that shows the incapability of Nigeria as a sovereign state to nurture its sovereignty. And the last part, the corollaries of such reliance are the dwindling of the naira, the balance of payment deficits, weakened sovereignty. And central to reliance on neo-colonial welfarism is enduring bad governance and lacuna of patriotism within the top brass, within our political elites. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lukman, for that brilliant presentation. So is Ayodeji still there? Ayodeji Adegbite. Ayodeji.
I think they are all muted. They are muted.
Yes, he's here.
I'm here.
Okay. Ayodeji, we are having you next. Sorry. All right, so Ayodeji Adegbite is a doctoral candidate at the History of Science, Medicine, and Technology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So his dissertation, tentatively titled Decolonizing Global Health, African Medical Practitioners and the Politics and Science of Disease Control in Africa, take the environmental and African medical practitioners as a point of departure to examine the science, politics, and historical epidemiology of diseases from colonial to post-colonial period in Nigeria. So today, Ayodeji will be talking on the topic yellow fever and the railway. The title.
I've muted it.
Paradox of colonial development and knowledge production in colonial West Africa, 1893 to 1919. So, Ayodeji, can we have your presentation now, please?
Okay.
The one is not muted.
Let's say muted. So just
So can everyone hear me now? It's echoing.
Deji, I think you have two devices on. That's why something is echoing that side. I think you have to like turn off one device.
Can you hear me now? Here.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now? My presentation, my slides are not. Okay. Can everyone hear me now? Okay, good. So my name is Adijam. I'll be presenting on yellow fever and the railway, the paradox of colonial development and knowledge production in colonial West Africa. So quickly, based on the theme of this panel, looking at trying to cap this niche from the literatures of colonial development and imperial welfare, which is also which late colonialism literature is also involved. And basically, what these scholars argue is that colonial development is sort of a framing device, that brings together a range of interventionist policies and metropolitan finance with the explicit goal of raising colonial standards of living. And then so usually colonial welfare programs, including the railway, which I'm focusing on, is seen as a project of civilization. The railway has this massive recruitment of labor, creation of wealth and the likes. And then one of the arguments of this scholars of colonial development and imperial welfare is that most of these development programs and infrastructures are beset by paradoxes. So in this short presentation, what I'm arguing is that the railway and the colonial epidemic map that was produced in the wake of yellow fever outbreak in 1910, became like a sort of paradox. While the railway played a crucial role in movement and transportation, it also led to the spread and distribution of the yellow fever in West Africa during this period. But I'm also arguing that the railway was not just a corridor for the spread of disease, because through the epidemic map, in which the railway lines are entrenched, and colonial authorities were able to transform, their understanding of yellow fever disease, and as such, the control mechanism for the disease in West Africa. So here's a slide showing, a map and just a snippet that shows the volume of commodities that the colonial authorities were exporting, extracting and exporting out of the country at this time. And then you have beside it, this is just a short map that shows the network, of commodities, and how the railway is just basically mapping this West Africa region. This shows coal, cotton, hides and skins, and how during this late 19th century through the early 20th century, colonial authorities, were immersed in all of these, commodities. And then, here's a slide basically showing how the railway in West Africa was mapped. It started in Sierra Leone and then extended to other regions. And by 1914, the Nigerian state had been created through this amalgamation of the southern and northern protectorate, and the railway was very crucial in mapping and connecting to these two disparate regions. And basically, what I'm doing with this slide is to argue that the railway, as we know, people have written about railways, and labor and economy, but the railway doesn't just transport people. It became even a passenger itself. It became a conduit, right, for the transportation, and the mobility of the stegomyia, which is or the Aedes aegypti, which is the virus that transports yellow fever. And then so, it's led to the movement of people, it's created this fetid pools, that conceals mosquitoes, basically transform the landscape. But it doesn't just transform the landscape from movements and commodities. It also led to the spread of disease along what Mark Harrison called the arteries of trade. And then so the next slide shows. Okay, also the picture on the right shows this image in secondary where you have railway workers, you have the kind of conditions that are created by the railway. So there's this outbreak in 1910 of which my presentation is centered. And this 1910 outbreak had Dr. Arthur On, who was a colonial doctor. He compiled this extensive report on this yellow fever, and I'm just going to say briefly, some of the important things that resulted from On's report. So basically, it's mapped out the different places where the yellow fever virus got to in West Africa. It has 64 racially categorized yellow fever cases across West Africa. And, of these cases, 40 were Europeans, 11 were, Syrians. But it also had these cases in Togo where there was more European deaths. And it has these wonderful epidemic maps, which I'm going to show later. But before we proceed, it's important to show the state of knowledge of yellow fever in the beginning of the 20th century. The idea of that Africans were immune to yellow fever was very prevalent at this time, and several colonial reports, colonial reports of missionaries, also showed that there was a lot of confusion about the knowledge of yellow fever. Ronald Ross, who was a very, very important colonial scientist, believed that the subject of yellow fever is still a matter of conjecture. There are theories about miasma, theories about African climates, being responsible for its spread. But then, On's epidemic map, as I would argue, begin to transform this understanding of yellow fever. This map of Accra, for example, which has red, we have red dotted lines, basically across railway lines, showing the path in which the yellow fever was passing through. In Nigeria, up to 1914, the medical section of the colonial reports, continue to feature places where outbreaks of individuals occurred. There were cases in Warri, Tegema, Oguta, Onitsha, Focados, and these are, and even in Lagos, and these are places where the railway routes passed. Here, I thought this map was supposed to be broader, but here you have a map of West Africa where you have all these kinds of railway lines that basically map the territory, and you have red dotted lines. It's not too legible now, but you have all this red dotted line showing how the railway was conveying the virus of yellow fever through West Africa. And then, having read this report, Robert Boyce, one of the very important colonial scientists, started to rethink the idea about yellow fever. And Boyce was very, very important. I can't hear you, but I'll just continue. So Robert Boyce was very, very
you have 4 more minutes to go.
4 minutes, that's good. Perfect. Robert Boyce basically studied this map, and he began to rethink the understanding of yellow fever. And then he asked in this paper that he published in the British Medical Journal, that from whom do the Stegomyia derive their infection? Then he responded to himself, the answer to this can only be the black races. It's important to understand that this knowledge was informed by all of these developments that you saw from the maps. More Africans were beginning to be shown in the maps to contract. More Africans were beginning to be shown through the maps that were contracting disease. There's also an international.
Dr. Rabi, please mute yourself. Dr. Rabi, please mute yourself.
Okay. It's true.
Okay. So there's also an international angle which I won't go into
Go on.
because of time. Yeah. So basically, here I'm going to read this slide. Having mixed easily with Europeans since the 15th century on the basis of live and let live, inhabitants in the West African coast were often exempted from segregation policies that was a common practice in other British colonies. While public health ordinances meant to control yellow fever was passed in 1905, they were often not enforced. Medical cartography and epidemiological maps are the kinds that unproduced constitute a kind of rhetorical means to argue for certain theories of disease. An UNS epidemics map showing how the railway enabled the spread of the disease during the 1910 to 1913 outbreaks reshaped colonial understanding of the disease. Colonial authorities began to see more Africans susceptible to the disease. And even in the archives, you begin to see more Africans showing, showing in the archives that they contracted the disease. Outbreaks in Africa further confirmed some of these new theories about the disease emanating from outside the continent. In the examination of another yellow fever outbreak in 1913 by the scientists at the Medical Research Institute in Yaba, Lagos, for the first time, the report recorded more African cases than Europeans. And then, as a result of Boyce's research, he was able to help to hold conferences in West Africa with other colonial medical authorities, and he basically initiated this segregation policy, right? While colonial authorities were a bit lethargic in their response in the 19th century, as a result of this new idea, this new understanding of the disease means new response. And then seen through the epidemic maps, as a reservoir of the disease, Africans had to be separated from Europeans. Freetown, the center of the 1910 outbreak, was quickly divided into 14 sections. And while European quarters were quickly rebuilt 400 yards from the nearest native quarters, colonial medical authorities believed that a spatial distance of 440 yards from Africans was sufficient to stop Africans from infecting them. And then Lord Lugard, who inaugurated the most comprehensive scheme of segregation after the railway, enabled the amalgamation of the northern and southern protectorates, started to also, enforce this segregation policies in Nigeria. And then, so by way of conclusion, I will just return to my argument that using colonial epidemic map, of the 1910 outbreak of yellow fever along the West African coast, I show just one paradox of colonial development. The railway that is seen as projects of civilization became a conduit, for spreading yellow fever. So I say the railway did not just convey commodities or bring civilization to Africa, as colonial rhetoric would often emphasize. It also helped transform landscapes and became a conduit for the spread of yellow fever again. So this new understanding about
all right, Ayodeji, thank you very much. We are really out of time now. I'm sorry. So we can still come back to your discussion during Q&A. So
no problem.
right now,
You.
so let's have Dr. Mbalise quickly, please. I'm sorry. So we are running out of time. So this is 9:51 already in Nigeria. So Dr. Mbalise, let's have you. Unfortunately, I won't be able to read your bio. Just quickly introduce yourself, briefly, so that our attendees can know who is presenting, please, and the co-panelists too.
All right,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. That maximum of 14 minutes, Dr. Mbalise.
I won't use
thank you very much.
I will use like 5 minutes. The point is very short. My name is Dr. Chinedu Mbalise. I'm a historian from the Nnamdi Azikiwe University. I studied at the University of Nigeria, Suka. All my degrees are from that area. I think my topic is very simple because it is really a new area I am delving into to consider some things that most African countries engage in. They feel free to receive what they call aids and welfare packages from the Western countries without actually looking towards the effect of these aids to their countries. So my title is sorry, please. It's just a circle. Rethinking Western aid and welfarism, welfare programs in post-colonial Africa. Why is it important that we look at this particular topic, especially when it comes to aid? We know that aid programs are usually programs that are given to countries, mostly those who share same colonial experiences, and some of them actually emerge from some kind of disturbing situations, ethnic tensions, ethnic wars, and all the rest of them. And then after colonial rule, like perhaps most of them who were coming from the British colonial experience, they were meant to join what they call the British Commonwealth. And from there, they continue to receive some form of aid. And then I try to look at the issue of aid and how it is helping or disturbing the rate of poverty and underdevelopment within these countries. And I've been coming up with the argument that what we have as some form of aid, which should be temporary and complementary to national resources of most national countries, appear to have become permanent, within the countries of Africa. Now, aid is supposed to come maybe after an event, say like war or any natural or man-made devastations. We provide aid from Red Cross and some other missions to aid those countries to survive and to pass through the horrors of those experiences. But what we've seen now is that most national governments, rather than see these aids as something complementary and
Dr. Rabi, please unmute yourself. Mute yourself, please. Okay, thank you.
All right. So most countries in Africa, most leaders in Africa, rather than see aid as an avenue of providing succor, from people emerging from harrowing experiences, people coming from experiences where their locals and their places have been devastated. Some of them simply see this aid as something that should be permanent. It's an easy come food, an easy come wealth. So they relax themselves. Even national governments now receive those aids, even fail to distribute to their people. You see, coming from what we've seen from the views of Chimuizu Cloud Ake, Water Rodney, we thought that colonial rule had come and showed some experience of exploitation to the African man. But it is surprising that in colonial experience, most African leaders are now the ones entrenching this what I call welfare colonialism in their various countries. So I try to look at the views of Randolph Elsie in what theory he called the aid dependency. I think from this angle, the aid dependency argues that most countries are giving aid, from Western countries, and they depend on this aid to now, move on with their countries without actually thinking deep as to how to liberate the surface of their people. And so we also look at the fact that most of what we see as aid, from the point of view of just a circle, it's just about the continuation of the known method of imperialism and exploitation, where the Western powers have access, unbridled access to the mineral resources, natural resources, and human capital development of some countries. And what they do is to ensure that they continue to milk and exploit those countries, and in return, bring to fore what they call aid to assist those countries in whatever they are doing.
Dr. Rabi, please mute yourself, please.
So we try to look at, not just looking at the aid as something that has happened, but inwardly bringing down to the normal, to the basic micro communities that feel the impact of some of these disturbances, some of these aids, where these aids are needed. Do they actually get it? Because sometimes these aids come to those countries, national government will get them, share them within their colonies, and then the real poverty still persists. When we shout that Africans are really poor.
Dr. Rabi, please mute yourself.
It's still on. Still on. Okay. So you see that the worry we have is, despite the effort being made by some countries to develop, you still see most African countries being referred to, like in Nigeria, as the poverty headquarters of the world, and then they encourage their citizens to go after these aid and welfare schemes, and without actually thinking, how do we entrench development in our own states? So we want to, by the research is bringing to, for the micro areas, those who should benefit from the so-called aid and welfare. Are they really doing that, or
Dr. Rabi, please mute yourself, please, Dr. Rabi, please.
Or is it causing some form of laziness on the part of the people evaluate this? So we try to look at this. In fact, it's having the village level associations, professional associations, business groups, and unions. Mostly in Nigeria, you see that some civil societies are now using these Western aids as an avenue of exploiting, getting some funds, and then without actually minding how that affects development in various African states. So I've tried to look at some kind of comparison between some countries in Africa, like Nigeria, go to East Africa, or pick up Tanzania, pick up Mali. These countries that are having disturbances, either from wars or from terrorist activities, and then they are receiving aid from these countries. What role are those Western countries playing, to create this room so that the aid dependency will remain and continue? So this is the angle that this research is coming from. So the central argument and conclusion of our paper is as simple as this: that what we see as aids are somehow an avenue of entrenching what I call in post-colonial Africa aid dependency, to ensure that people don't reason beyond development, and they depend on these aids, and over time, these aids will make them not to be worried, whereas they have the natural resources that could help development in most of the African states, and thereby perpetuating dependence on these so-called Western aids and welfare programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that brilliant and succinct presentation, Dr. Mbalise. So I'm not surprised you've been doing this for a very long time. So let me quickly go to Oluwatosin Adeyemi right now. Like I said, I won't be able to introduce you guys again due to time constraints. So I hope Oluwatosin will be able to introduce herself, briefly, so that our attendees and panelists can know who you are. So let's have you, Oluwatosin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oluwatosin Adeyemi, from the Department of History, University of Ibadan. So today I'll be presenting on mothercraft and infant welfare demonstration, the patterns of imperial healthcare and welfare schemes in colonial Nigeria. My slides. Okay. My slides.
Your slide?
Yeah.
You can just open it.
All right. Can you open it? Let me. Just a minute. Should have.
So she already sent it to me.
I think. All right. Thank you. Okay. So I'll be discussing about mothercraft and infant welfare demonstration, patterns of imperial healthcare and welfare schemes in colonial Nigeria. Can you take it to the next slide? Thank you. Thank you. So I'll be giving a brief historical background to mothercraft and infant demonstration. So the British goal of expanding competitive trade from Europe down to Africa was to establish commercial and trade links. However, as a result of this expansion, the British pattern of imperial welfare in Africa now tilted towards healthcare and education. So although before the British came down to Africa, we have healthcare was provided by religious organizations such as the Presbyterian Mission, the Church Missionary Society, as well as international organizations such as Rockefeller Foundation and Red Cross. So in the course of administering these colonies in Africa, the British introduced maternal and child health facilities and services that targeted mothers and children with the aim to reduce infant and mortality death rates in their colonies. And at some point we can understand that while Britain was also fighting against tropical disease epidemics such as smallpox, yellow fever, they're also looking at how to also limit the cases, like to limit the high case of maternal deaths in their colonies. So this paper seeks to investigate the patterns of imperial welfarism in colonial Nigeria. We focus on mothercraft and infant welfare demonstration. This is done in order to recognize mothercraft and infant welfare demonstration, as well as to reconcile conflicting notions of British imperial enterprise in post-colonial Nigeria. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. On June 1931, governments, churches, and business representatives from 8 European nations and several colonial territories in Africa met in Geneva to discuss the welfare of African children. So to summarize this discussion, they tend to conclude that mothers itself, they are the real cause they are the real cause of the high rate of maternal deaths, because due to carelessness with irrational feeding of their kids. So at the end of this summit, mothercraft teaching became the solution that was adopted in Europe and Anglophone countries in order to mitigate high infant mortality rates. So now, to the understanding of what mothercraft is in its own word, it can be identified as an educational process to expectant mothers due to the increase in infant mortality. So for instance, we have trainings on healthy infants, breast milk, exclusive breastfeeding, nutrition, and to mention but a few. So it is also imperative to know that mothercraft talk is an integral part of antenatal care. Next slide, please. Thank you. So efforts were actually made to improve maternal and infant welfare. Measures were also taken to reduce the mortality death rate in the country as of that time, and this includes medicalization of childbirth, scientific infant feeding, and child rearing practices. So although at some point because the British in its colonies, we have, they have different methods they actually adopted. So in the below slides, the scheme will be briefly discussed. Please, can you take it to the next one? I'm trying to rush. Okay. So it's okay. Part of the scheme is Imperial Baby Challenge Shield Competition, otherwise known as baby shows. So this was a mechanism of social regulation through which women were encouraged and then rewarded. Health weeks and baby shows became regular events in colonial Nigeria that featured children for birth to 5 years. And at some point, the maternity and child welfare centers organized this baby shows competition. And also, these mothers and babies are selected from these maternity wards. Like, for instance, if you're a mother during that period, if you're not, if you don't attend the maternity wards, you can't participate. So this is also another means to encourage mothers to come to the maternity ward and also get rewarded for participating. Colonial Development and Welfare Act, CDWA. So the Colonial Development and Welfare Act was a post-war development policy and political reform. So this was also, it was like one of a social welfare strategy in which the Colonial Health Development Welfare Act enlightened mothers on the importance of good nutrition and offered possibilities of new consumer economies with increased demand for infant food importation in Nigeria. There were awareness about mothercraft and infant demonstration, just like I mentioned earlier about the baby show competition. And also there was development in social services for women. During that period, we have women going for trainings in domestic science, amongst other things. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so now mothercraft lectures. So this is also another scheme. I mentioned the baby show competition, I mentioned CDWA hacks, then also mothercraft lectures. So mothers were advised and child-rearing manuals were given on how to be a good mother, how to raise a child, while promoting the significant position of women as caregivers and managers. And at some point, like for instance, I mentioned earlier that I said in different colonies, we have different initiative the colonial masters used. For instance, in Ashanti, mothers were educated on dealing with things like how to properly bathe babies, bathing powder, amongst other things, how to make pancakes. But in Kumasi, the mothercraft lectures majorly focuses on social welfare projects, going to the clinics, amongst other things. Then in Belgium and Congo, colonial masters within that they emphasize majorly on breastfeeding. And at some points, this initiative, these lectures changed the birthing process, the method of breastfeeding, weaning, and the choices of meals during the colonial period. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So now I'm moving on to the patterns and how these patterns, were at some points they went hand in hand, and how these patterns
Tosin, you have 5 more minutes to
fulfill the mission of the British during this period. So it can be deduced that the patterns of the British healthcare system geared towards the essential of mothercraft infant welfare demonstration. Maternal consumption served to determine the integration of the sacred sphere of mothers and children, and this now became a new strategic marketing and consumer practice. This new wave of strategic marketing and production drive was introduced into these colonies and it later served as a dumping ground for European manufactured goods, especially baby products, baby laxatives, baby medicines, to mention but few. Now, mothers were now transformed into consumers of British baby supplements and products that are necessary for child rearing. Mind you, I mentioned earlier that I told you about what mothercraft means. So now, at the British capitalist activities in the colonies thrived. It thrived as these welfare schemes offered Britain new consumer economies opportunity. Now, the pattern of the importation and consumption of industrial infant food and British baby products increased to the decline of the indigenous baby products and baby medicine. In addition, the commodity status of mothers, mothercraft, and infant demonstration stood in the foreground of trade talk through consumer-directed advertisement and discussion.
2 more minutes to
now,
go.
for instance, now,
2 more minutes to go.
anyone can be interested in getting any milk, but a mother will be conscious of the kind of milk to buy in the market. So that's in the newspaper, in the print media, we now have milk whereby there's baby milk that are directed, the advertisements are directed both to the mother and to the child. Oh, mothers, take this milk for your baby, for a healthy and strong baby. So please, next slide, please. Thank you.
So say 2 more minutes to go.
Okay, for instance, as you can see in this image,
2 more minutes to
we
go.
have a mother bottle feeding a baby. So now this image is registering into mothers, like mothers that have access to the newspapers or to the print media during that period. So this image is registering that, oh, okay, I can actually bottle feed my baby. And lactogen is a foreign product, it's not an indigenous product. Likewise, Ostamilk, like this pictorial advertisement on Ostamilk was structured on mothercraft and infant demonstration in the sense that, okay, wise mothers rely on these products for their child's growth, and you can see that baby is looking happy. So these are also this is also a part, like a mechanism that the British also made use of. Please, can you go to the next slide? Thank you.
2 more minutes to go. 2 more minutes to go.
Now, moving on, mothers want the best for their babies, so they are ready to learn and comply with the instructions that promote their health and that of their baby. There became a shift from indigenous baby products to the adoption of British baby products. There also became increased demand for imported infant food. Now, mothercraft practices and infant demonstration now became more of economy than welfare in colonial Nigeria, because at this stage, it's now it's more economic than welfare. I don't know. Okay, let me use that word. So the British imperialist enterprise in the 20th century, in other words, was intimately bound up with making mothers both at home and in the colonies.
Tosin, can you hear me?
Thank you. Conclusion. In inference, it is clear that colonial Nigeria was run as a business venture, with the colonial authority profiting from it. Fine, they introduced different concepts, in order to see to the welfare of their colonies, but indirectly, they're also benefiting from it. Like, for instance, now we have more, the infiltration of British products in the market. We have mothers adapting to different methods of rearing a child due to the baby show competitions that are being held. Every mother wants to feed their baby well. Every mother wants to participate, to be in the spotlight, because across the colonies in Nigeria, these baby shows competition were organized in Abeokuta, in Aba, in Lagos, to be precise. So now, these same patterns now offered new consumer economics opportunities for the British government. This study, however, deduced that in post-colonial Nigeria, this change. Sorry?
Your time is up.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So I don't know what's wrong with the system. So I've been shouting that your time is up, that your time was up, but I guess you didn't hear me. All right, so thank you very much for your presentation, Tosin. Like I said, we're running out of time already. So I think we have 1 hour 10 or 1 hour 20 minutes for this panel. So let's quickly have Dr. Rabi now. So Dr. Rabi, like I said, I won't be able to introduce you. So just briefly introduce yourself and let's have your presentation. And if you are not ready, let us know. Are you ready for your presentation now, Dr. Rabi?
I can start.
All right.
Can I start?
All right, yeah, go ahead. Okay.
My name is and I'm present. So my paper is from.
We can't hear you clearly, Dr. Rabi. Maybe you should fix your earpiece very well.
Okay. Now, can you hear me now?
Panelists hear him well? Can you all hear him well? Okay, go on.
Okay, can you hear me now? Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My paper is type dynamic of colonial programs in Northern Nigeria from 1960. And the thrust of the paper is on how colonialists look at something in terms of social development within the 60 years of their. And it is very important to understand that colonialism had that with social welfare as because the primary aim is exploitation of the resources. Therefore, despite claims from some sources or from literature that there are benefits of colonial British or any other system, it is very, very good to understand that there was nothing like colonial social welfare program, the colonial system in Nigeria, and particularly in Nigeria. So the introduction of the paper called that some scholars attempt bring the interaction between the colonial infrastructural development, colonial social welfare, the northern Nigerian protectorate between 1900 and 1960. However, if we look at scholars such as Walter Franz Fanon, as well as like Samira, they make it clear that colonial and social welfare it has everything to do with the exploitation of the resources of the colonial territories. Therefore, uh, all the reviews of the existing system on development varying mostly from the African perspective relied much on the theory that considers an exploitation. The paper is divided by subtopics, although I'm not a now by the initial or the first subhead of the paper or subtitle branch on the background of the British colonial which I said began as early as 1903. And before 1912, almost all the territories that we know as Southern Nigeria, they were brought under colonial subjugation, and except with few areas, the middle, middle region of Southern Nigeria, which they focused on middle belt. So there were continuous and systematic resistance to colonial rule, some active and some passive, but that did not deter the implementation and the continuation of colonial. So before the beginning of the First World and after and immediate after, almost all the territories that can hold other countries were brought under and which the system under that system introduced programs that some consider as benefit of the like native code, native authority, native and a lot of others. However, all these programs were meant for that possible and also to help the success of all the programs that are in the subject. particular and part of Africa at large. So the second subject take on how to attempt to make Northern Nigeria a kind of urbanized society by introducing some urban infrastructure, some of the areas, some specific areas that are important to the region. We can remember we thought that railway came to the Nigeria and came as an infrastructure together with the electoral system in order to use colonial development. But the main issue was that the introduction of the telegraph and also the introduction of even the medical activity in the colonial during the were MBS success of colonial. So with this perspective, we have noticed how the colonial system the resources. In the title of topic, subtitle of my paper is the availability the issue of source and development during colonial rule. So that we can understand that from the previous session that we had such as that colonialism also just ensure that we can see that some of the resources that Nigeria was to mine areas and also vast agricultural land was part of colonial authorities use their infrastructure to exploit or to take away the product of tea mines, the product of
Dr. Rabi, sincerely, we can barely hear you. And the noise of the passengers there are actually disturbing the conversation.
Maybe the next I'm back. The next minute I'm back. Yes, but I'm just so can I just take an airport before only?
You know what? Maybe it's just we are running out of time actually. So maybe it's just conclude.
I'm just now because I'm at.
We still need enough time for Q&A. So maybe if you still have other things to discuss, we can always,
Let's raise a conclusion.
Okay.
My conclusion throughout there was no significant so the rural region and the second world and whatever led the colonial rule that is over extending some one-time program into northern Nigeria, especially areas of transition in Southeast Asia. So the development in Southeast Asia made it almost very, very necessary how they build their content and also it led to the emergence of colonial program in 19, beginning from 19, and then
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Rabi. Sincerely speaking, I could barely hear you, so that's you know the reality. I don't know if others were able to hear you too, so it's quite unfortunate. All right. Okay, so we are left with just four now. Okay. I said initially we had 11 attendees, so now we are answers. So our attendees, if you have questions for any of the presenters, please let us have your questions, under the Q&A. Questions.
Hello.
Hi. Yes.
My question is premised. It's premised around neo-colonial welfarism. Reason why my question is premised around that is because evidently colonialism is gone and is dead, but its legacies are indulgence in the discussion of colonial welfarism without assessing how it relates to the present. I think it served no valid purpose. So my question in this regard is that how impacting on governance in contemporary Africa, that our contemporary African leaders learning from colonial welfarism of the past, contemporary African governance. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that questions. And I think, these are some of the questions that your papers should address. So I should direct the questions to you. So,
okay.
It's open,
Okay. In my work, I actually address that. And it's evident in the theories I considered, the dependency theory and modernization theory. The dependency theory actually hammers on the need for African states to hold on tightly to their sovereignty by being responsible, by not being reliant on hate. Although, according to modernization theory, it's a norm. It's an accepted ethics that sovereign states look to international monetary institutions like the World Bank and IMF to sponsor needed projects at a domestic level. However, I wouldn't subscribe so much to that, in that it keeps us highly indebted and it weakens our sovereignty. It makes Western axis porous, especially now that knowledge has been monetized. What I mean by knowledge is ICT, information communication technology, where all big techs we use are mostly from the West. Even AIDS as well, also from the West.
Lukman, to give a direction to that question properly. Originally, I have one question for you. So maybe that should help us, put the question into, a proper perspective. So, and the question is, how does the Rostoy theory of development, for instance, help us to understand, the paradox of welfare?
Okay, thank you for that question.
Like you mentioned it. I've read Rostoy, into this into the discourse on imperial welfarism in Africa, for example?
There is also 5 stages of development gel perfectly with this proposed study, in that it actually validates the need for colonial welfarism during the colonial age, during British Empire state, in that like our level of development at that time, we were at the takeoff stage. And we are the takeoff stage, and also we couldn't even boast of precondition to take off stage then. So at that point in time, like the British were actually exposed to them of refining raw products and them, but there's a way from colony. We still seem to be at that traditional society and preconditions to take off, in that hitherto we still import petroleum products, whereas we have crude oil, we have relative advantage in the context of crude oil. We have we have absolute advantage in the ownership of crude oil, cocoa, cotton, and all that. We hardly refine these products, we sell them out and send it back to our country. In this modern age where we have applied scientists that are experts that could make these things work, and we also have the money. So indulgence in this actually showed that like we are still relying on colonial welfarism. We'll still like exploit these resources out they are in their natural form, just to find them a little at which also called the precondition for take-off stage. So based on this, that's why we can't even harness our economic potentials. That's why we can't even compete with countries such as China, Turkey, and India. And that's why we can't even take advantage of international trade. So in my view, colonial welfarism has actually weakened our sovereignty, and it has actually given up the vibe that the philosophy of paternalism strongly exists in most Anglophone colonies, in Nigeria precisely. So thank you.
So thank you very much for your response. I wouldn't want to drag that further, because I would have loved to take you on your own conception of colonial welfare itself. I wouldn't want to go further anyway, because I have questions for Ayodeji. Deji,
sorry for interrupting. I would have loved a slide. Sorry, Mr. Ayodeji, I would have loved a slide.
We don't have the time. We don't have the time.
Look, man, just hold on.
We all want to exhaust our ideas, but we don't have the time. Deji, is Deji still?
Thank you, sir.
Is Deji still around?
Yes.
Is Deji still around? Deji, I think it's still around.
I'm here.
Okay. So I think I have a question for you too. So the question is, at what point did the British colonial government thought it wise to initiate that ordinance, and what were the factors responsible for it?
Which ordinance?
The ordinance you referenced, the welfare ordinance.
So there are at least two ordinances. There was one in 1905. There was one in 1905 before Yellow Fever. My argument was that this first public health ordinance, the British colonial authorities were lethargic about it. But it was the Yellow Fever epidemic of 1910, which was perfectly mapped into epidemic maps that was created by Dr. On, that made Yellow Fever more legible, right? That made it, that made African cases of Yellow Fever more prevalent in colonial documents. As a result of that, as a result of this new understanding of the disease, in 1910, the colonial authorities then inaugurated this no segregation scheme, right? Thereby leading to this 40 distance.
Like you have two devices on there because it's echoing.
Okay. I'm not.
Can you?
Am I muted? I'm not sure what's happening again, but those are the dynamics between the two different ordinances. You can't hear me.
Okay.
But we can hear him. I think he was going to tell me something, but we can't hear him. So
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your clarification, Ayodeji. So, I think I have another question for Dr. Mbalise. So I enjoyed your discussion on how, the post-colonial states, is, a continuum of what the late colonial period was in, with regards to, how the British colonial government kind of handled issues related to colonial welfare. And how post-colonial leaders, have, messed up, the concept of development. And again, I remember that you also mentioned how NGOs, have proliferated, African societies in ways that, when you put it on a scale, it's difficult to tell, their activities are African society welfare development. So how do you see this connection? Like, would you say, genuinely, would you say what we have right now is it's a legacy of the British or is a legacy of colonialism in Africa, or let's say Nigeria, for example? The proliferation, would you say it's one of the legacies of the British colonial government in Nigeria? And my question is directed to Dr. Mbalise.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Those who have
Okay, send the questions across. Where are the questions? Two people have questions in the house. Where are the questions? The Q&A section is open. I can't find any question there.
In the house, I want to
Okay, go on. Ask your questions.
So, what has colonial welfarism?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fine. So let me attend to the question you asked, Wali.
Okay.
So I said, you see, the thing is, the way the Western world structured the post-colonial African society, it's as if what we have is a continuum. It's a continuous process. At no point was Western welfarism truncated, but there were changes in the policies and programs, the pattern at which they are now implemented. That we now ask the question: what actually are African leaders doing? What can they separate some of these colonial experiences from what is now in Africa? Now, you agree with me that the structure of colonial exploitation, in terms of what we have in multinational corporations, multinational signing bilateral and multilateral agreements between countries, and then determinants of the activities of these multinational corporations in most of these African states. The nature of exploitation determines that whatever that is coming out of Africa sometimes is largely influenced by these Western countries. And by that way, the activities in West Africa are inextricably linked to the control of, quote unquote, these Western powers. So we'll say that in the post-colonial era, that Africa has been divested from somehow from the entire control of the Western powers. In as much as we can't continue blaming the West, but the structure is not permissible for Africans to actually detach themselves. So that structure is what keys them in. The activities of World Bank, IMF are so that Africans will, like I said, aid dependency, welfare dependency, always run back to these bodies for help, which I say the help they receive are not commensurate with the level of development that we have in Africa. So there's a link between the both of them. Again, the instrument of Commonwealth of Nations, where the British government has all the countries that have shared the same colonial experience are now still meeting up to this 21st century under one umbrella. Of course, it speaks more of what you ask. What is the relevance of Commonwealth from somebody who was once your colonial master? So there's a link between the what we have now and what has happened. The foundation.
All right. Thank you very much for that brilliant response. So I would have loved to ask Dr. Dairu a question, but unfortunately I couldn't hear him clearly. Dr. Rabi, are you still with us?
He's muted.
Okay, I enjoyed reading his abstract, but unfortunately I couldn't listen to his presentation due to obvious reasons.
I'm with you, doctor. I'm with you.
Okay, I couldn't listen to your presentation. So, okay, we have a question.
Okay.
We have a question now, and I think this question is directed to all the presenters. Any of you could jump on the question.
Okay.
So the question is, how does colonial legacy still affect Africa in 21st century?
Okay. Can I respond to that question, sir?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I think we can hear you clearly now.
Okay. If I can make an attempt to respond to this question, I think what I will say, there are numerous ways that colonial experience that the colonial world had still manifesting or affecting the former colonial territories, despite some 60 years, some of them more than 60 years after getting what we call independence. Because in reality, some scholars are of the view that politically, we could say African countries are independent, but economically, they are not independent. So to some extent, even politically, we can say many African countries, if not all, are not completely politically independent because their political programs, as well as the structure of system, the structure of political electioneering, all of this were directing a replica of what was dictated to the colonies during colonial. And most of the African countries were given independence. They have not gotten their independence because there are two differences. To get your independence is different from taking your independence by yourself. Because if to say African countries had succeeded in taking their independence by themselves, not as a grant, maybe the narratives would be different. But as we are today, the biggest mistake that the African countries did by allowing them, by allowing the colonialists to dash them independence or to grant them independence instead of getting independence by themselves. Let me just use two examples. If you look at the Francophone countries in West Africa, look at Guinea. Guinea that was led by Sekou to get independent from political experience of other French former colonies. They are more or less a branch or an outreach of the French government, French government of French society.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Rabi. Unfortunately, I just received a note from the technician in charge of our section now that we are left with 2 minutes. We have 2 more minutes to go. So,
Time up.
so
It's time
thank you
up
very
already.
much. You said what? It's time up.
Yes.
All right. So thank you very much. I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you for deeming it fit to to be here present today to present your paper. I enjoy listening to every one of you that I was able to listen to. I think I would love to relate with Dr. Rabi on a personal ground and possibly read his paper so that I can really get 1 or 2 things from his ideas, because I enjoyed reading the abstract to be